Vanakkam. Hello friends. We have been exploring the emergence of the early Chola Empire and saw how K. N. Sivaraja Pillai, the noted historian, considers Veliyan Thittan as the founder proper of the early Chola dynasty. In his book, The Chronology of the Early Tamils, he assigns the time period 50 BCE to 25 BCE to the role of Thittan. KNS details how Thittan captured and fortified Urandai and made it his capital city and went on to annex the forest of Arisi, the Arkadu, the forest of the Ar or Atti tree, after which the Ar flower, the Atti Po, is adopted as the royal emblem of the Chola kings. Now, Veliyan Thittan had a son named Thittan Veliyan, and in one of the earlier poems sung by Satandayar, the martial prowess of Thittan Veliyan is captured against a chieftain, a Mallan of Amur. In the Purananuru poem 80, which falls under the Tinai of Tumbai, where two warriors take on each other on a one-on-one war wearing the Tumbai flower, the poem begins, In Kadunkallin Amur Angan, Maindudai Mallan Madavali Murukki. In Amur, where liquor is sweet and potent, the pride of Mallan is subdued by him. With one leg squeezed against his chest and the other one wrapped around his back, blocking him from escaping, he twists and snaps the body of the warrior on both ends. Like a hungry elephant trying to eat bamboo, he attacks and kills him in combat. Nalginum nalgan ayinum, vel por arun Thittan kanga til amma. I wish that Thittan, who is ferocious in battle, could see this whether it pleases him or not. Here, KNS infers from this phrase, Nalhinum Nalhanayinum, whether it pleases him or not, a strained relationship existed between the father, Thittan, and the son, Veliyan. What could be the reason? Remember, in the previous episode, we saw a line from Nattinai sung by the lady poetess Nakkannayar, Vel por Cholar Arisiyam Perungattu. This Nakkannayar was the daughter of one Perungoli Nayakan, one of Thittan's commanders in charge of the fort of Koli or Urandai. KNS conjectures that the love intrigues of Thittan's son Prince Veliyan with Nakkannai must have been the reason for Thittan's displeasure. Nilakanta Sastri, in his book The Cholas, quotes three poems, Purananuru 83, 84 and 85, to establish that Nakkannayar was indeed deeply in love with the prince. KNS shows how even in those early times, Urandai went by the name Koliyur or Koliyur to differentiate it from a Koliyur, which was the capital of an I kingdom. He also shows how these ancient towns took the name of Koli, meaning a banyan tree, and how in ancient times Kudal, later known as Madurai, was also known as Peralavayil, again here Alavai denoting the banyan tree. He says, and I quote, "These names in course of time have given rise to the fanciful myths of the cock and the serpent, which have stood and still stand in the way of their correct derivation." He criticizes the mythological stories that came about later about how Koliyur got its name from a cock putting up resistance against an elephant and a serpent going around the city of Madurai trying to measure it. That Veliyan Thittan also had a daughter by the name Ayyai is inferred by KNS from another poem of Paranar in Agananuru that goes, Aripai Silambin Ambalam Todalai, belonging to the Marutham, where the heroine says to the hero who has just come back from the concubine's house, in Urandai dense with paddy, the town of the rain-like charitable king Thittan, whose daughter Ayyai, with slender arms like the bamboo shoot. KNS shows that this is the only poem that has reference to this daughter of Thittan. Veliyan, Thittan's son, proved to be a worthy successor to the seat of Urandai. He embarked on a series of conquests and subjugated many chieftains and brought their territories under Chola rule. Nilakanta Sastri in his work points out how even at that time succession by birth had been established, again proof that the practice should have been in vogue for a considerable length of time, indirect evidence of the antiquity of such kingship. Varian's first aggression was against the chieftain Parayan of Por, a province on the banks of the Kaveri basin, and KNS shows how initially Parayan was an independent chieftain, quoting again from Agananuru 186 sung by Paranar, where the verses go, Kaveri Vaipin Por Anna, Yen Seri Valai Udaitalo Ilane, Uridinin Yam Tan Pahayem Allem. I would like to give the meaning of this poem, so beautifully translated by Vaidehi Herbert, whom I thank profusely for the excellent compilation in her learnsangam.tamil.com, falling under the Marutham Thinai, which is Vudalum, Vudal Nimittamum, the Uriporul, meaning the quarrels that happened between the hero and the heroine, mostly brought on by the hero's visit to a concubine. Here, the verses are narrated by a concubine, what the concubine said as the heroine's friends listened. They say that his wife hates me. I have not broken in anger my stacked bangles that are lovely like the poor town on the Kaveri shore of Parayan with victorious spears. I am not an enemy to his wife, her husband who abandons women, turning their pretty brows pale. He is the enemy with whom she is living. Again, an unrelated Agam setting that goes to show that Parayan was an independent chieftain. But later, he sinks to the level of a dependent chieftain, doing the bidding of the great Chola overlord. Now, this is again brought out by an Agananuru poem sung by Paranar, poem 326 in the Marutham that goes, Izhayani Yanai Solar Maravan கழையளந்து அறியா காவிரி படப்பை புனல்மலி புதவின் போவோர் கிழவோன் பழையன் ஒக்கிய வேல்போல் பிழையல கண்ணவள் நோக்கியோர் திறத்தே. Her eyes attack without fail those whom she sees, like the spears thrown at enemies by Parayan, lord of Por, made fertile by the Kaveri, and the commander of the Chola king who rides victorious well-decked elephants. With Varian assuming the title of Porvaiko, the king of Por, it is obvious that he won over Parayan in war. Varian comes to be known as Porvaiko Perinar Killi, where Peru and Null are general adjectives, and Killi becomes the generic name by which the later Chola kings came to be known. Nilakanta Sastri explains the root of the word Killi as digging or a cleavage, which is not all that suitable. But in today's Tamil lexicon, the word killi is used to note a man with valor, a meaning derived from the title of the Cholas, and Thithan Veliyan was the first to assume that title. Veliyan next sets out to conquer the Kongu country, which is west of Por, and a poem in Nattinai by an unknown poet shows how he pressed Parayan into service in his fight against the Kongu tribes. This poem, Nattinai 10, also shows how Parayan could not make much headway in that particular war. Why? It is very interesting how KNS brings the contemporary chieftains in building the narrative, and he shows how the famed chieftain Nannan of Yeril Kundram, the region comprising the northern half of the Western Ghats, whose clout extended to the south up to Kongu country, which actually lay to the east of the Ghats. Given his dominant position at that time, Nannan should have brought about a coalition of the hill and forest tribal chieftains falling within the Kongu land. Again, proof of this coalition is taken from a field of battle described in a poem by an early poet, Kudavayil Keerathan, in Agananuru 44. Nannan Yetre Narumpon Atti, Tun Arung Kaduntiral Kangan Katti, Pon Ani Valvil Pundurai Endru Angu, Andru Avar Kuriya Azhappu Arangattur, Parundabada Panni Parayan Pattana Kandadu Nona Nahi goes the poem. Nannan rallied the Kongu chieftains, Yettrai, Atti wearing fine jewels, Kangan, who was hard to approach, Katti, and Pundurai with his gold ornaments and a strong bow. he rallied them in a battlefield fighting this coalition. The Chola commander Parayan died in battle. Another chieftain, Ainan of the Villavar tribe, who was again an independent ruler of a province known as Vahe, enjoyed his independence till Varian annexed his kingdom. In a Purananuru poem 351, which falls under the Thurai Mahatpar Kanji, a specific subdivision where there is a beautiful daughter of a chieftain and a king demands her hand in marriage, and where the chieftain refuses, the king with his troops lays siege to the chieftain's land. Sung by Madurai Padaimanga Manniyar under the Thinai Kanji, the poem goes, Padumani Maringin Panaindal Yanayum, Kodinudangu Misaya Therum Mavum, Padai Amai Maravarodu Tuvandri Kallena, கடல் கண்டன்ன கண்ணகன் தானே வென்று எரி முரசின் வேந்தர் என்றும் வன்கை எயினன் வாகை அன்ன இவள் நலம் தாராது அமைகுவர் அல்லர் என்னாவது கொல்தானே. The king has laid siege to our province. He has come with a vast army that looks like an ocean. He has come to capture the beautiful daughter of the chieftain. Her beauty is akin to the elegant city of Vahe, ruled by Vankai Einan, the strong and generous chieftain Einan. But later, he too becomes a subordinate of Varian and ends up leading Varian's army as its commander against Nannan of Edil Kundram. Of the many references to this battle that are contained in Paranar's poems, KNS quotes the one from Agananuru, poem 208, Yama Iravin Nedungadai Nindru Themudir Semaya Kundram Padum starts the poem. The poem goes on to describe what happened at Pali, which is shown to be part of Nannan's territory, where Nannan's commander Nimili took on Einan in battle and killed him. This defeat stalls Varian's progress for some time. A couple of interesting lines in this poem, Pul Orungu Amkan Visumbin Vilangu Nyayitru ஒன்கதிர் தெராமை சிறகு அரில் கோழி நிழல் செய்து உளறல் காணேன். The poet describes very interestingly how Einan was a protector of birds, and so when he lay slain on the battlefield, the birds came above him and fluttering their outstretched wings created a canopy protecting his body from the sun's rays. Again, Paranar shows in the Agananuru poem 142 of how Nannan's chieftain Nimili fought and killed another chieftain Adiyan of Pullunadu that formed the southern half of the Kongu country, a territory that had already been annexed by Varian. Kalar was another territory in the Kaveri Delta, then in possession of Matti, a tribal chief of the Baradavar, that is the fisherman's clan. Wielding considerable power over the coastal territories, Paranar shows how Matti was also an independent chieftain in his poem in Agananuru poem 226, Valvil Yerulthol Baradavar Koman, the strong-shouldered Matti who wields the bow and arrow and owns many spears, in whose territory the overflowing Kaveri washes along the white Marutham and Vanji trees, depositing them on the shores of his Kalar town. But eventually, his territory is also annexed by Varian, who then becomes the unproclaimed lord of all the coastal territories, as again described by Paranar in Agananuru poem 153, Sinangezhudhanai Tittan Veliyan Irangu Neer Parappin Kanalam Perundurai. Now, though it makes the narrative lengthy, we are looking at all these Sangam poems not only to enjoy their aesthetic beauty, but also to understand the setting from which KNS has critically examined these poems for historical information and how he meticulously weaves our early history. The concluding lines of this poem, Agananuru 226, capture a very interesting scene. Valimihum munbin bananodu malitar tittan veliyan urandai naalave பாடியின் தென்கினை பாடு ஏட்டு அஞ்சி போரடுதானை கட்டி பொறா அது ஓடிய ஆர்ப்பினும் பெரிதே. The poem describes how two petty chieftains, Katti and Panan, decide to go to war against Varian and approach Urandai. But on hearing the joyous Kinnai drums playing from within the fortress, they are scared out of their wits and run away. And here is KNS's take. Though this poem captures the martial glory of Varian, Varian's rule could not have extended over an expansive domain as it did after the period of Karigala Chola, so much so that two smaller chieftains thought they could take him on in war. KNS places Tithan Varian's rule between 25 BCE and the 1st century Common Era. There are no references as to who ruled over the Pandya territories during this period, but regarding the Chera line, KNS puts down the names of one of the earliest sovereigns of the Chera dynasty, who is believed to have been the founder of the early Chera line, Karuvur Eriya Volval Koperinjeral Irumburai, the first sovereign to launch the Chera line, about whose rule we will continue to see in the next episode. Vanakkam.